He said, when God restored, and this person, the reason I started telling her story, not just that God restored, when she had her first baby, immediately the husband saw that she was pregnant. The husband don't used to allow her to enter his own car. The husband went and bought her a brand new car, tear rubber. They were living in their own home. Oh. The husband went and bought another home in her name and said to her, I want to just be your boy in this house. The girl called me and she said, woman of God, God can restore. I am speaking to a woman here. I'm speaking to a man here. God can restore. I am speaking to somebody tonight. God can restore. When he restores your joy, he restores your peace, he restores your love, and he restores everything that you need for that restoration to be complete. He does. He did not just restore finance of Job. He gave Job a wife, gave Job children that were even more than the 7 children that he lost. God restores. When he restores you and restores everything that you lost. I speak to somebody's life. Let restoration, let mercy restore you. Let the love of God restore you. Let the love of God, let the mercy of God restore you. I speak to somebody's destiny right now. Be restored by mercy. Be restored by mercy. Let that your weeping, let that your tears be wiped away by mercy. Let that your agony, let that your sorrow be restored by mercy. In the name of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
But there is something, before we get into prayer, there is something that you must understand. I've told us that over and over again. I think it was last week or last 2 weeks when God prophesied to us and said, some women here have been blessing you, but anxiety and worry has not been letting you receive it. I told us that last week. I think that prophecy was last week or last 2 weeks.
Last 2 weeks.
It was last 2 weeks. So it's not enough. God can restore you, but you yourself will be the one to destroy the restoration. The Bible said Jesus healed 10 lepers. But it was only one that came back to say thank you. And he said, you're whole. So meaning that the 9 other people at a point went back and became leper again. So if God restores you, if you don't maintain that restoration, it will be as if he's not a God that answers prayer. So tonight we have a medical doctor in our midst. She's going to speak to us about anxiety, worry, fear. All those things that, is very natural and normal for women or men who are believing God for the fruit of the womb. It's very normal for them to feel agitated. It's very normal for them to be worried. Okay? But remember that worry biblically is a sin. And physically, it can destroy reproductive organs. Physically, it can stop and hinder you from what you're supposed to receive. So we are going to Dr. Patricia, please, can you speak to us about what worry and anxiety and stress can do to a woman who is expecting, or even to a man, because some men stress their wives out. They don't understand that just that stress and not unsupportive and all those things, things that they make women go through can even hinder their prayers for their wives. Please, I would like you to unmute yourself and speak to us. God bless you.
Hello, everyone.
Yes. Can you increase your volume, Dr. Patricia, so we can hear you? Is this for me?
I don't know if I know how to do that.
Okay, yeah. You're loud enough. You're very loud. Okay.
Well, so the prophet asked me just to say a few words and talk about the manner in which stress and impact the body and potentially impact fertility. I'm not sure if you all are aware, or does maybe somebody can tell me. Do you all know the percentage of women that struggle with infertility that are in the reproductive age? Does anybody have any idea?
That are under what? Reproductive age?
That are in the reproductive age, 15 to 49.
Okay.
Does anybody have... Oh, sorry, I have to sneeze. Sorry, it didn't come. Anyway, does anybody have any idea? If you do, please call it out. How many people think that it's less than 5%? Anybody think that?
Less than 5% of infertility?
Between women 15 to 49. Anybody?
Well, I doubt if it's 5%. I think it's more than 5%.
10%. Anybody? Any takers?
Yeah.
I just want to see if anybody has any
I
idea of
think
how.
I'll go with 15%.
I'll say maybe 20. Yeah, 20, 25.
Okay. Well, it's actually so the number of women who have what they call impaired fertility or problems with fertility is about 13, up to 13%.
Yeah, I know it was around that range. Yeah.
That's just women in general, and then there's the statistics. There's different statistics. The statistics on married women's particularly, and that's in the same age range, 15 to 49, and that's 16%. Okay. And so, and about 12, just under 13% of women in the same age have used infertility services. So the reason why I bring this up is just so that there's some awareness to the level of infertility and the amount of people who are actually struggling with this problem in the world. It's that's, you think about it, more than if you're in a room with 10 people, or more than one of them, potentially 1.3 technically, would 13% would have an issue. And so it's not uncommon. I wanted to really quickly talk about some of the things that can decrease the chances of someone, becoming pregnant, just from a medical perspective. Some of these things you may already know, but, age, of course, you talked about that. Smoking, heavy alcohol use, stress, poor diet, diabetes. If somebody is, does too much athletic training, though that's not as common, but that's a possibility. Being significantly overweight or underweight. Certain STDs, like people who have pelvic inflammatory disease and those sorts of things, endometriosis, and then conditions that impact the hormones, such as thyroid problems, or women who have PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. I don't know if you've heard it. Radiation, chemotherapy. So these are some of the things from a medical perspective that can impact your fertility rating, or your ability to have children, or your fertility. But just moving on to the stress part of it, despite the prevalence that I talked about, a lot of women don't, share their story. They don't talk with families or friends because of, the potential, it could be associated with depression, anxiety, isolation. Some women feel like they're losing control. Some women feel guilt, shame, low self-esteem. It can even impact your quality of life. And the depression rates that are associated with women who have infertility are comparable to women who have cancer. And that's fairly significant. So, and so really the question then becomes, does stress cause infertility? Or is it the infertility, of course, that's causing stress? We know that infertility can cause women stress. But from a literature perspective, just because how we in medicine, we always like to look at data and to know whether or not, just because we think it might happen, does the data actually show that? And so historically, there was some question. There were some studies that would show, yes, women have, with people who have higher stress levels potentially have lower fertility, more problems with infertility. And then there was some research that showed not. More recently, there was a study that was done with over 500 women in the US. And they showed that there was this particular enzyme that they tested. It was called salivary alpha amylase, but don't worry about that. There was an enzyme that they showed that was a biomarker of stress. And they showed in that particular, the women who had the highest quartile of that stress hormone were twice as likely to subsequently have problems with fertility. Right? So what does that mean? Right? So, and one other thing, that there was another study where they looked at cortisol. Does anybody know what cortisol is? I'm sure you guys have heard of it before, yes? You all know that that's stress hormone, right? Cortisol is a stress hormone. And so they did a study where they looked at the hair of women, of women who are having problems with infertility. And they showed that it was significantly correlated with pregnancy rates. So the higher your stress level, the more likely to have problems with fertility. And so why do I bring this up? Why is this even something that we want to talk about? Ultimately, stress in general in the body is something that's not good for us in excessive levels, chronic stress. And we see that happening in the U.S. It's very prevalent, but it's associated with a lot of diseases and a lot of problems. And the literature is showing that there is association with impact on fertility. And so why do I say these things? I think it's easy for me to say, come on here and say, don't stress. And of course the prophetess is explaining how we need to trust in God and his mercy. But I think sometimes when you have an understanding of what it is that you're doing to yourself by allowing that stress to sort of take hold of you, then you would be more mindful in trying to take on actions or behaviors that are going to help you mitigate your stress. And so I wanted to just take a few moments just to give you some of the statistics, but then also just a few strategies for you to think about on how you can reduce your stress levels as it pertains to your stress and anxiety as it pertains to potentially getting pregnant. So one of those things is, I see some of you all today have already done that. As the prophetess mentioned, you need to enlist your partner, right? So your partner needs to be engaged and involved. Like she said, it's not something where you just say, oh, that's your problem, go figure it out. No. You all have to sort of take on the idea. One, you know that this is an issue for you, but you shouldn't both focus on it. So maybe limit the amount of time you're discussing the problem, right? So that you're not focused on the problem with each other. Okay, we'll talk about this for 20 minutes, but after 20 minutes, we're not going to keep going on and on. You all should maybe take on the role of dating yourselves again, right? Set aside time each week where you're just enjoying one another. There was someone that was on, I think it was even on the youth retreat that just happened. She was talking about how she goes on walks because of COVID. Her and her husband go on walks now every day, and they do about a 3-mile walk. And during that walk, they're able to talk and things like that. So just taking the time to really grow in your relationship and support one another, that's one thing. Rethinking your own attitude as it pertains to when you think about pregnancy. So if someone has been struggling with infertility for some time, it's natural for you to have pessimistic thoughts. But those pessimistic thoughts, they really just spiral you down in a direction that you really shouldn't go. So you have to be cognizant and sort of proactive about counteracting those negative thoughts and those negative ideas in your head, and creating more realistic and positive responses to the challenge that you're going through. The next thing you could consider doing is journaling, okay? And I know many people are busy, but even if you take a little bit of time, if you write faster, fine. If you type, that's another way to do it. And writing out your feelings, and that can help you take off some of the pressure that you're feeling about what you're going through. And even sometimes, physical acts can sort of help contribute to the effect. So if you've written down things, maybe even that they're very negative, take that thing and maybe burn it or tear it up, trash it, and throw that. If you're having negative thoughts, throw it away, right? So that's another thing you can do. Staying active is very important. So one, you can do things that sort of help, that you have a general interest in, that indulge maybe your passions, but also engage you in activity. And exercise as well. Both of those things can increase your serotonin levels, increase your mood, help you to relax, take the edge off in terms of stress, give you endorphins. These are all positive things that are going to help your body. The other thing is, if you happen to be overweight, okay, you might have higher levels of estrogen production. And that can interfere with ovulation, which is one of the biggest problems with infertility, ovulation. So it's one of the things you want to think about as well. Again, work on relaxation. So of course we here together, we're talking about prayer, and praying is a way to relax. But if you do other things, like some people like to do yoga, some people do muscle relaxation techniques, things like that. It will help slow the heart rate, decrease your blood pressure. And again, you're just trying to sort of mitigate excessive stress hormones running in your body. And then having support. I mean, this group is great.